Welcome to the newest live episode of HIP's Houston Indie Podcast Society. I am Jared.
I'm Kerry.
This is Ming.
And it's our first one of the new year, 2022. So let's get started. We have Kerry. We have Kerry and Ming, obviously. We have Craig Price. He is the host of Matinee Heroes and Cast-off, and he is also a moderator at several different conventions, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But thank you so much for joining us, Craig.
Oh, absolutely. Good to see you guys. It's always good. Kerry and I go way back from Podcasting World. Ming and I have seen each other probably 3 or 4 times last year alone. And Jared, you're the newest person that I know. I want to thank you for helping out at Comicpalooza this year. I really appreciate you joining the cast-off and doing that weird show in the middle of the floor.
It was a great time. I really had a lot of fun doing Cast-off. And Ming, you were supposed to be there too, but you weren't able to get in there. I was really hoping to be able to go head-to-head with you.
I will jump in this year.
He's always busy. Don't worry about it, Ming. I know you're super busy.
Yeah. I was handed a number of moderating duties, and those come first, obviously.
Obviously.
Yeah. Totally understand. They come first for me too. If I got a moderating duty, the cast-off is canceled. So
it's been cast off. I gotta say, Craig, I really love being on Cast-off and just the whole format about it. It's just a lot of fun. Explain to everybody watching and listening what Cast-off really is.
Well, Cast-off is a spin-off of our main show, Matinee Heroes, because Matinee Heroes, we talk about movies with my co-host Alan Cerny, who's with Vital Thrills. He's a movie reviewer, and we talk about movies we love. And so what we do every episode is we talk about the movie, we recast the movie, and then we set a double feature. So we took the recasting part out to make it a competition. So basically it's a person by person competition where, if you have, let's recast, I don't know, what do you got? What's we're going to do comic book men. Who would you have as Ming? And so one person's going to go with Stephen Yeun because he's awesome. Stephen Yeun is awesome from The Walking Dead, and the other one is going to go with the guy from Revenge of the Nerds, and that's wrong. So point goes to
Stephen Yeun. Okay, Oscar nominee Stephen Yeun. Yes,
absolutely,
that's true.
And then we keep going down. We usually try to do 7 in about a half an hour. That way is an odd number, and if there's a tie, we do our double feature, which is a feature of the Matinee Heroes podcast. But it's a nice little way of just playing the game and really talking about actors we love and characters we love. Because it's not that we dislike the characters and we want to recast the role. It's because we love the characters, but we'd also like to see how would comic book Ben be cool if we recast it in an all 60s kind of situation, or we use all people from the 70s. Put Bruce Lee in as Ming Chen.
Who's replacing Kevin Smith? Who do we got?
What we'll see.
Any era.
Any era. It depends. Are we going with the new and improved post-heart attack slim Kevin Smith? Or are we going to go with full-on, I got the trench coat, heavy-set Kevin Smith? Because
immediately I say Kevin James because that's the guy he always gets confused for, even though I don't see it. Like they have nothing alike or nothing in common.
I think it's just the name, maybe.
Yeah, it's the Kevin, and they kind of walk alike. Have you ever seen Kevin James walk? He kind of has that.
Yeah, like that gait.
Right.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So things like that. So we do that, and that's a live show that we did. The new season starts March 1st. So if you can head over to matineeheroes.com/cast-off, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can watch us every Tuesday at, I think it's 6 o'clock Pacific, which means it's 8 o'clock Central, and then Ming 9 o'clock Central Eastern. Yeah. So
I love it. People are always they're like, hey, I got this great idea for a podcast. I'm like, what's it about? And there's always a question of longevity. Will they ever run out of topics to talk about, or is there will it end quickly? But there's endless movies that you could talk about, and they keep making them. So you probably pretty much have a podcast that could potentially run forever, and I love it. I love that it's half movie lover podcast, half debate podcast, all geek. So well done, my friend.
Well, it's funny because I did it originally as a panel. That was the creation, was to pitch it to a panel for these Comic-Cons and have the people vote on it live. And we've done a couple since then. But as soon as it was something that I developed during COVID, because I had a couple places. It was right before COVID. I submitted the panels. They were all accepted, and then everything got canceled. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to do it on video. So that's the Cast-off. But Matinee Heroes we're episode 270 something. We've been going on for about 5 years, and then I had a podcast before that. That was a business podcast that was on for 5 years. So I've been podcasting for a long time.
Don't be sad about it.
Since 2011, I think.
What was so going into that? What was your impetus for becoming a podcaster? What made you go, "I'm going to do this. This is what I want to do"?
So I was I was a business speaker. I would go to conventions, but they were the type that auditors went to, or that salespeople went to, or it was the National Association of Legal Administrators kind of thing. And I was giving keynotes and stuff. And I had to get dental surgery, so I had to do it at a time when it's very slow for me, and that's right around the holidays. So Christmas, we get through Christmas, January 2nd, they had to pretty much sew up my mouth. My wife refers to this 6 weeks as the golden time of our marriage, but I couldn't talk for 6 months, for 6 weeks. So I was just sitting there alone in the apartment. I wasn't going out because I had stitches, and it was gross. It was awful. And so I started to listen to podcasts, and I really saw it was Mark Maron. He had an article come out in the New York Times, and I knew Mark Maron from stand-up.
Yep.
I met him a couple times when I was in New York doing stand-up. We're not buddies, but it's just one of those things where I always appreciated his comedy. I'm like, oh, he's got a podcast. Let's listen to it. And I really liked it, and I liked the format. And I kind of stole it in a business way. So I started a podcast called Reality Check with Craig Price. And I had different business people on every week. And it ranged from the normal stuff like marketing and sales and small business owners. But I also had FBI agents and orangutan rescue, and one of the big ones I had was John Simons from Comicpalooza. I had him on to talk about how would you even do a Comic-Con, because at that time when I interviewed him, Comic-Cons were kind of new to me. So this is the thing that I want everybody to know, and everyone should do when you have a podcast. Do not be afraid to ask people. All they can say is no. So I literally just looked up who runs Comicpalooza in Houston. Oh, this guy. Boom. And I sent him an email, and I said, hey, I'd love to interview you and talk to you about your deal. And he said, sure. And I went to his house, we recorded, and we had a good, hour-long conversation. And afterwards, he's like, hey, you're really good at this. You'd be good at a moderator for one of the cons. Would you like to do that? And I'm like, absolutely. And that got the ball rolling. But never be afraid to ask. So that's what podcasting is. It's just asking people. They'll say no, and you just move on to the next person. It's not life or death.
Exactly right. Is that where your moderating came in? It was because of John Simon?
Yep, absolutely. Wow. And it was because of John, and then it was because of the way Comicpalooza picks moderators. A lot of their moderators are local TV people. Mm-hmm. And this was the year that Tara Reid was there. And
I remember this year.
Yeah, and the person that was supposed to interview Tara Reid forgot that Houston has traffic at 5:00, and so they did not show up. So I was just poking my head around in the PR office like I always do, and to say, "Hey, what's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, it's Craig. You moderate. Go to the main hall and interview Tara Reid in 3 minutes."
Wow! Okay. So they put you on the big stage at Comicpalooza, just thrust you 3 minutes. 3 minutes warning, and Big Lebowski's Tara Reid. American Pie's Tara Reid.
Right.
Wow.
Sharknado, Tara Reid. Yes, I was literally Googling her because I know of her, but she's not on my, radar very much. Yeah. And so I'm running there. I'm like, what am I going to talk to her about? Oh, yeah, she was in she was in a Robert Altman movie. She was in The Big Lebowski. We can talk about Sharknado, but that really put me on the radar because not only did I do a good job, because it was very difficult. Nobody asked any questions but me, despite the fact that I kept on asking people if they wanted questions. But I filled in on an emergency. I did a really good job, and that helped my reputation. And the rest is very struggling history, but it's always moving forward.
That's awesome. And anyway, listening out there, that you would not have been as smooth on that stage had you not been a podcaster. That's all.
Well, I
That's
will
very
say
true.
that's probably true, but I also have an entertainment background, so I've been on the stage my entire. Like I said, I was a public speaker, so I've been speaking pretty much since I was 16,
Yeah.
and I'm
Oh.
no longer 16.
Or a couple years old, maybe.
Yeah.
Whatever. We're
Yeah,
not going to
yeah.
judge you for what age.
Yeah, but I've been on stage for a long time, so I'm fairly comfortable, especially in a situation like that where you just ask questions.
Yeah.
You know, it's a little more difficult when you don't know who they are, and I often get in positions where I don't know who the people are because there's so much stuff out there in the world
Yep.
that I can't know everything. But
So besides Ming, who's been some of your favorite people to moderate?
I have moderated for Ming several times. I actually, one of my favorite times, and Ming will back me up on this, it was a great event that nobody went to. It was in Dallas, and I had a chance to back-to-back Mings. I interviewed Ming for him for the Nerd Year's Eve, and about 10 minutes before that was done, my phone started ringing, and my wife took the call because I was up on stage with Ming, and it's like, hey, can you go next door and interview Ming Na Wen? And I'm like, absolutely, I can easily do that. So Ming Na Wen, Christopher Eccleston. I had John Cleese's North American convention first appearance.
Yeah. Yeah, that was huge. That was huge.
It's always been great. Even my favorite ones are the people I don't know because I get to learn more of them. But with John Cleese, it was one of those situations where he does not need a moderator. He actually does events and then does Q&A by himself anyways. And so they were telling me, you may not be needed, you might be needed, so you have to prepare for either one. And so basically I had to prepare to meet John Cleese, and if we go on stage, I got to be ready. I got to be ready with a moment's notice. And if we don't go on stage, I have to make sure not to cry in front of John Cleese because he's huge. I'm a huge fan of his, and he's a genius. And the key is let him be funny. If you happen to be funny, that's great, but don't try too hard. Just try to let him do it all. And thankfully, we had a great time.
Yeah, you don't want to steal his laughs.
Yeah, no. Well, he's going to have enough that you don't have to worry about it. But we did a bit on stage. It was great. It was one of the best times I ever had on stage.
How was the experience of doing these moderating for big celebrities and seeing the conventions? How does that go back into what you do in your podcast? How does that affect the way you do a podcast?
Well, my interview style is very conversational anyways. I try to do a little prep work just to start the interview, but I try not to do too much because then I'm kind of asking questions that I already know the answers to, and it sounds boring. So I try not to over-prepare because my job as a moderator, and I think Ming will back me up on this, it's not to ask questions. It's for in case nobody does ask questions. Our job is when everybody goes quiet, that's where we come in. I'm mostly traffic cop. And it all depends on what convention you're doing because they all have different rules. Like LA Comic-Con, it is you are interviewing them. That's it. There is no interaction with the fans. They're there to watch. You are just talking. But, with Salt Lake, with Fan X, they really want the audience to get involved. So I'm just asking like 2 or 3 questions up front, 5-10 minutes, and then 55 minutes of the audience. And then it's follow-up questions. So I try not to get too prepared. I just want to make sure that I don't sound completely stupid. But again, I don't have to be an expert because you just leave it up to the hardcore fans that are in the audience. So it's really fun because you get to help make the show better, at least in my little tiny mind. I like to think I'm making it better, but it's not a lot of expectations and it's not a lot of hard work on my end. Only when I have to do Tara Reid and nobody asks a question, then it is a lot of work and you have to make it look seamless. So it's really you're really there as an insurance policy.
Which do you like better out of those two options, where the audience is not interacting at all, or where the audience actually does get to ask questions?
Oh, I want the audience to ask questions because
Okay.
Because that means I can still ask questions. That's the great part. It's taking a huge load off what I've got to do, and all I have to do is ask good follow-ups, make a funny comment, something relevant. But I don't have to. It's not all on me and the guest just ask questions. So, and a lot of times they're going to ask some really hardcore stuff that they really want to know, especially if it's somebody I don't know. When I did Renee O'Connor and Lucy Lawless, I missed out on the Xena thing. I was living in New York City at the time, and I didn't have a television because I lived in a basement in New York City. And so anything I saw was on DVD, and so that whole era of television disappeared from me. So when I was asked to do that, to fill in for somebody again, I start off with the Ron Swanson, Mrs. Ron Swanson, and I talk to Renee, and you just try to get 2 or 3 pieces and then let everybody else do the heavy lifting. So I really like the fan interaction the most because I have an improv background, and I like to be able to just kind of respond. I'm much better at responding than thinking.
I've seen a lot of Q&As and things like that and watched them and been there where you always get those people when they do ask questions finally. They always ask that really uncomfortable question, and it's like sort of cringeworthy. What do you do in those situations? Do you just let the celebrity sort of handle, or do you try to step in and try to help out?
Well, it depends on the question, of course. I try to get them to move along because one of the things that a lot of moderators don't do, and they should do, is right before the actual panel, you're in front of everybody talking. And I usually tell everybody, hey, I'm real lazy. I don't have a lot of questions. I'm going to rely on you guys. But remember, as desperate as you are to ask them a question, there's 15 people right behind you. So get right to the point. And I've had people, like with Lucy Lawless, I had someone try to give her a fanfic script. And it's like, no, and you just got to stop it. You're again, traffic cop. I have to be the bad guy. Yeah. And that's fine. The guest we don't want the guest to have to say anything that's going to get them upset, but I can say anything they want to get upset with me because they don't know who I am, and I can walk through the crowd and nobody remembers. So it's really about taking that bullet, which is easy. I mean, I try to do it with some flair, and I did stand up for a while, so I know how to shut people down without causing too much damage. But yeah, you just got to do it. That's your job, is to protect the guest and protect the show. And sometimes it's not them trying to be bad. It's not them doing it on purpose. It's just that they get super nervous. And so they get nervous, and sometimes they ask inappropriate questions because in their mind it sounds good. Like, my wife can't stand you, but I think you're wonderful. You know, all of a sudden now that's kind of weird.
Geez.
Thanks for letting me know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Why did you do this stupid horrible movie you were bad in? It's like, no, instead of going, what do you do when you're not really into the movie that much? You know, there's different ways of framing it, but they're so nervous. And I get that way before, but as soon as I hit the stage, it kind of disappears. But I get nervous ahead of time. Ming's seen me at shows. I'm pacing. I'm all over the place. I'm constantly moving.
I think we all do that. Has there been ever who's been the most intimidating, or maybe one that you were like really nervous for?
John Cleese was the one that was the most intimidating. Okay. But you know, that's the other thing. I worked at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and I met a lot of celebrities at that job. It was just one of those things. I was part of the liaison team, and so they're just human beings. And that's the thing I always keep in mind, is that they're just human beings, and they're they got everyone knows who they are, and they have a lot of talent in a certain area, but they're just regular folks. And that's the great thing about conventions, is that most of them don't have to be there. There's some that who do make a living at the conventions, but there's some that don't have to be there. Bing-Nao Wen does not need to be there. Benedict Wong does not need to be there. He's starring in the Marvel movies now. But he's there because he doesn't get a chance to meet his fans very much. They're all real nice. I've not had a bad experience, even with people that have reputations of being tough. I found them to be very pleasant and very nice if you just treat them like human beings versus getting fanboy on them.
Right.
I mean, I get fanboy on Ming. I mean,
I do all
the time.
I demand that. So
yeah, because he's like, "Why are you always at my booth, man? I got people.
Come hang out, man. It's a party. It's always a party at the Ming Chen booth. Always.
Yeah. Well, see, I'm too old to go out when you do stuff after the party.
Oh yeah.
And I go to bed. So I'm always looking at the Facebook going, "Oh, Ming was out doing all this cool stuff and drinking and having fun." But I always go to make sure to see him at the cons, because it's one of those things like, hey, it's a buddy. It's always nice to have a home base. Like, I know Ming, so I can go hang out with him and feel like, I have a comfort. I don't know anybody else in this whole building besides Ming, so that's good.
Yeah, you're always welcome at the table, my friend. How was it for you last year? How many cons did you get to? How many moderating gigs did you line up?
Well, last year was weird.
It was very weird.
Because Salt Lake is my go-to number one, always a good time. I've never been. Every year is better and better, and each year they treat me better and better. And the the people I get to moderate for are bigger and bigger, and so the progression with Salt Lake is how it feels like it should be, and yet it feels like I'm just hanging out with my buddies for a weekend. Other places I go to, like I'm the ones I'm used to, I've gotten a little less with, and then some of the new ones have been really well. Like that Comic-Con in Ontario that we both did just in December.
Comic-Con Revolution. Yep.
Yeah, which will be again in May.
Yeah.
Which I will see you then. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
They were really nice. It's a very small. It's a small one that I'm used to because I'm used to the big 100,000 in 3 days. And it was a beautiful little tiny one. That's great. Everybody was really nice. Brett Cullen from Houston was great. And we talked about Houston with him, and Robert Wall was there, and Robert Costanzo was my buddy the whole weekend. Every time hey, Craig, how you doing? Oh, you didn't think I remember your name? I'm like, yeah, I know you remember my name, Robert. Is there anything I can get for you? How are you doing? Sam Jones was there. So it's one of those things where it's a small con, which I like because you get to see more of the celebrities and kind of pal around a little bit. But also you get to see all the kids. There's a lot more little kids, I think, at the smaller cons.
Yeah.
The big cons are just too much to bring your 4-year-old to.
Yeah, a little overwhelmed.
So you both, Craig and Ming, you guys go to a lot of shows, a lot of cons. Getting back to podcasting a little bit, how do you see conventions really accepting the world of podcasting and how they approach it now?
I've been seeing a lot of usually they have the vendor booths where people just go and vend stuff. I've been seeing podcasters either cutting a deal or purchasing or maybe even sharing a vendor booth and setting up and podcasting for the weekend, which I think is awesome, which I think is smart too. If you have maybe a movie themed or geek themed podcast, what better place to set up at for 3 days in a Comic-Con?
That's your target audience right there.
Talk to fans, talk to vendors, talk to fellow geeks. Maybe even grab a guest from a Comic-Con guest or two to come by. That's they're there. A lot of them have podcasts already, so there's a good chance they may jump down, or they may be browsing and they're like, oh, what's going on? Can I jump in? I do it all the time. If I see a podcast set up at a table at a con, I jump in, and more often than not, they're like, holy crap, you want to podcast with me? I'm like, heck yeah, man, let's go. Are you set up? You ready? Let's go. Yeah, I love it. I love it. So I think more people should be doing that.
One thing that I want to say specifically about the cons and going as a podcaster and getting your own booth and stuff, not only is it a great place to find fans, people who might be interested in listening to your podcast, but you can also kind of talk to some of the businesses that might actually want to sponsor.
Yeah.
It's a good place to find some of the smaller businesses that might be able to throw a few bucks your way to have an ad on your show or something.
And it's advantageous to the convention as well, because I know like Comicpalooza and Salt Lake will give panels to podcasters. It's not just like a little booth that they're doing it. It's like literally on the panel schedule in a room, and you're doing that. I know in LA Comic-Con they had a podcaster's booth right next to the main stage, and they were interviewing people as they were done, because the way they scheduled it, they had a little more gaps in their main stage presence. And I can't remember the guys' names. I know Jay Washington is one of the hosts because he's one of the moderators in Salt Lake with me. But they were right there. They were literally, if you went to the main stage and you just looked, there they were. And they had all weekend that they were podcasting 10 feet from the main stage, just not during the main stage. They were doing stuff in between. And that's what I think conventions should do, is partner with as many of these podcasts that they can, just to spread the word, but also because it's a little more interesting when there's things going on, because you have people who are professional, mostly professional podcasters, or as good as professionals, doing this for you right there. And it's a great way to fill in your schedule.
That's a cool idea. Do you see shows getting more involved and maybe doing like more official, like here's the official, LA Comic-Con podcast or Salt Lake City and all that kind of stuff? You see the place for that?
I don't, because it's mostly because it's a thin margin of profit for the convention anyways. And so if they're not making money, they're not really paying attention. It's like moderating. Moderating is something they don't really pay attention to a lot. It's really tough, because you get there and it's like you're kind of a second thought for a lot of these conventions. They know you're needed, but we're more like the drinks at a casino. Our job is to keep them in the building so that they'll spend more money. We're not there. We're not the main feature. We're just kind of like the drinks or the free drinks that come through. and I don't see them doing it unless they can get a big enough stage presence. Like if Joe Rogan were to do it, I'm sure they'd love it and they would invest in that. If
not going there right now.
Like Critical Role, which is a huge podcast, if they were going to be, and they do conventions, and they do live shows at the conventions as guests. That's where I see the partnerships going. I don't, as of right now, I don't see as many street level like us. We're like the Daredevils in the Jessica Jones of the world. We're not the Avengers.
Which one are you?
Me? I think I'm that. Remember in Jessica Jones, that fat guy that could run real fast? He was just in that one episode. He was like a really heavyset guy, but he was actually like supposed to be really fast. That's probably me. He was one episode and done. But if it's one of those things where I don't think street level people such as ourselves who don't have major investors and sponsors, I think they'll use us, and hopefully they'll use us to fill in their programming. But I don't know if they'll elevate it to a full-on podcast. And also, there's a lot of contractual stuff they can't do. They can't release a lot of the panels. I mean, I always ask, and that's the first thing I do on the Thursday before a con is I go talk to the AV people, and I'm like, where can I plug in my Zoom?
Yeah, can I record this?
Yeah, who's available to be recorded and who's not? And thankfully, most of the time it's good, but sometimes they're just lost to history. I've had a couple good ones that just poof, they're gone because weren't allowed to keep them. But that's why it's kind of a struggle for them. And also just a lot of technology. A lot of people aren't in the smaller panels. It's the main stage is being recorded, and that's it. It's hard to get the smaller panels unless we record them ourselves. And I mean, I know, Carrie, you know how to do it, and I know how to do it. Ming, we all know how to do it, and we've done it before. Yeah. But not everybody has that skill set or the equipment.
Right. You got to make it easy for everybody to be able to. And everybody wants to help promote and then promote themselves and just have fun doing it. That's what it is.
It's super fun, and that's one thing I've always appreciated with the Fan X in Salt Lake is pretty much every single main stage I've done has ended up on the podcast. Because I'll record it, and then we'll highlight a movie they're in, and then so we'll talk about the movie, and then we'll as an extra bonus feature, we'll have the whole 45-minute conversation with them afterwards.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because my favorite one was Kevin Conroy. We did the Mask of the Phantasm, and then we talked to Kevin Conroy. He had this amazing. It was in San Francisco. We had this amazing conversation about Robin Williams, where he and Robin Williams used to be roommates at Juilliard. Him, Christopher Reeve, and Robin Williams and Kevin Conroy. They all lived together in this one-room apartment, and they
so Batman and Superman lived together.
Absolutely, and Mork.
And Mork.
Yeah, and Mork.
Mork from Mork.
He lived in the egg in the corner, though, right?
Well, they put sheets up. They, like I said, they literally lived in one bedroom apartment, but they would put sheets up to separate their rooms. And Kevin would get told a story about how he brought a girl home, and Robin was practicing voices on his side of the sheet, but the girl didn't know that it was one person. He was having a fight as a Vietnamese family. And she's like, what is going on over there? And it's just Robin. But it was a great story about how Robin developed all his characters, but yet he was like that all the time, even by himself.
Wait a minute, you had Batman, Superman, and Robin all in the same house.
Yes.
Yeah.
Batman and Robin. There you go.
There you go. Carrie, you're finally getting the old dad puns are coming through.
I've been holding him up back, man.
Dad jokes.
Get him back out.
We got dad jokes. Hey.
So one of the things that I think is really interesting for podcasters specifically is the fact that there are podcasting conventions. There's Podcast Movement for sure. That's one of the biggest right now. Unfortunately, I've talked about it several times on the show, but PodCon in Seattle, it was there for 2 years, and that was probably one of the best if you were a podcast fan, because you were able to go and watch actual live shows of bigger podcasts, some smaller podcasts, and see some panels and kind of mingle with, the podcasters that you like to see. And I would like to see more of that. I don't know how sustainable that is, because everybody who's a bigger podcaster, they're requiring more and more time, more money. And I don't know.
And they do the bigger shows do their own tours and stuff like
right, exactly. So. Like the McElroys are doing their own live shows. Some of these other bigger podcasts are doing their own live events, and they're selling out theaters. They don't have to do the convention. So, but kind of going back to what Craig said, we're kind of in the independent space. We're not big enough to pull the crowds. So, unless people are interested in coming in and, trying to find something new, then it's hard for those conventions to really dedicate the time and money and effort to the smaller shows to be able to say, hey, let's get this thing going on this stage.
Yeah. So, Craig, speaking of sort of on that same topic, what do you feel about celebrities coming into the podcast realm, like big celebrities who don't really even need to do it, but they're interviewing other celebrities? They can get, really in depth with people that you normally wouldn't get with like somebody like us asking questions.
I will refer you to Conan. So Conan O'Brien has a great podcast, and he truly loves doing it. I mean, it's really fun. So we forget that, yes, there's a business behind it. And I kind of get irritated with some of these podcast conventions because it's really about how to sell your podcast. And it's like, that's great. You have to have something first, because very rarely are you going to be able to just sell a podcast. Podcast is a great way to get your name out there, get credibility, spread the word. It's very rare that you have a chance to I just did a podcast and I created this huge underground. Because even Joe Rogan, I mean, he's an actor. He was a comedian. He had a following of some degree. And yes, he exploded thanks to podcasting. But you have to have something to the table. And I think a lot of them, I think they spend too much time talking about making money at it, which you can do. But the folks that are going to be doing it are going to be doing it because they enjoy doing it. Actors are just like us. Again, they're regular folks. They enjoy talking to their buddies. Smartless is a podcast I listen to. It's just fun listening to them. It's Will Arnett and Sean Hayes and
Jason Bateman.
Jason Bateman, yeah. And they're getting paid for it. And sure, they make their money other ways, but it's, again, which is why
I listen to the Smartless every week. I listened to it today. Then I came home and watched an episode of Ozark. I'm like, there's a big difference between that Bateman right there.
Yep. Well, he's an actor, but
Exactly.
I don't see how I find it weird that we scold actors for doing the same thing we're doing. We're doing it for fun.
I don't scold him at all. I listen to a lot of it.
I'm talking about in general. It's more of a general thing. I think a lot of people do resent the fact that podcasters are being inundated with celebrities. Why is Anna Faris number one? Because she's having interesting guests and having a fun show.
It's a gateway. It's a gateway into into podcasting. I think because like you said, I like Anna Faris. Oh, she does a podcast. What other podcasts are there? Oh, I like this topic. I wonder if there's anybody that does a podcast just about that. And maybe before they listened to the Anna Faris podcast, they didn't even know what it was.
Yeah, that's how I got in with Mark Maron, because I knew who he was before I knew about his podcast. I didn't know he was a podcaster. I knew him from, short attention span theater in the 90s. So he's just someone I know. And so I was like, I'll listen to it. And it was interesting and fun. It always was. And so
we sort of glossed over it for a second, but you talked about being a stand-up comic in New York. Yeah. Tell us about that.
It was awful. Obviously, you don't know who I am, so I didn't do very well. But it was one of those things. I was Houston's funniest person in 1997, so I won that contest and caused a big stir because I apparently was the only person that didn't know anybody to win. There had been rumors that had been fixed for several years, and I kind of came in there and was the underdog that nobody knew who just won, and that got me into other clubs, and then I ended up moving to New York. I went to the New School for a year and kind of bombed out of that because I'm not a good actor. I also bombed out of stand-up because I'm not that funny. I'm humorous. I'm amusing. I've learned over the years that I don't have to be the funniest person in the room, but I can hold my own in conversations. But I am not Dave Chappelle. I am not television worthy. And that happens. There's so many people who continue to do it. I know people who are in their 50s and 60s who still do stand-up, and they're good, but no one's ever going to know who they are as far as stand-up. And it was good experience. Some people go to Toastmasters. Some people, sing at church. Doing stand-up in the clubs in New York will beat out the the ego out of you, and it actually helped me be more me. And so now I can be more me on mic, and I can be myself a little bit more. And I know when to throw in a zinger and know when to hold back. Well, maybe I don't know when to hold back as much, but I know when to throw in a zinger. And and I've tempered myself over the years. When I was 22, I did that when I was 22. So when I was 22, I was, hungry and running around doing all kinds of stuff. And as you get older, you start to realize that the more important things, it's not being the funniest. It's just, hey, he can do the job. He's good at that. You find the skills that you're good, and being hilarious is not my skill. Being amusing is.
So we talked about Cast-off earlier. Let's talk about more detailed about what Matinee Heroes is all about.
Oh, that one is a pure film lovers movie because Alan Cerny, which Carrie, Alan is a Houston film critic and has been for years. He used to be part of Ain't It Cool News and was there for a long time. And there's another person I just emailed out of the blue and said, hey, would you like to be on my podcast, my business podcast? And he said, sure. And we had him on once or twice a year, and then it became 3 or 4 times a year. And then it was, hey, you want to do a spinoff? Just us once a week. And it's us talking about movies we really like. I think a lot of movie podcasts are ironic. Let's watch a crappy movie and make fun of it. And that can be fine. I mean, how did this get made is great, but they're also professional comedians. We wanted to take movies we liked and talk about how great they are and how we can learn from them. And so we put that together. And so we've been doing that for 5 years. We've done live shows. We've done things for Alamo Drafthouse. It's a great way to introduce people and to get me into film festivals and get me into moderating more, because it's tough when you have 10 or 15 podcasts, but when you have 75 to 125 podcasts, all of a sudden you get a lot more credibility.
Yep.
So it's always nice to have that. So I have 2 podcasts that both went over 250 episodes. So when they talk about podcasting, they can just look. They don't have to listen. They can just look and like, oh, he's got 200.
Oh yeah, he's legit. Yeah.
So
it's got longevity.
Right.
Yeah, this guy's done 10. Okay. And they all have the same date. So he must have done those on a weekend. Yeah. So it's really, like I said, we talk about the movie in depth. We have a lot of guests on. We've had Adam Marcus, the director of Jason Goes to Hell, Drew McWeeny, one of the best film reviewers ever on the internet. He was just on recently, and we've been pulling people in and having fun, and it's just a great way to talk movies with my buddy Alan, which I don't get to do very much because we don't live in the same town anymore. So we have to do it. We used to do it in person, and now we do it over Zoom.
Now, what kind of research do you do? I know because each episode is a different movie. What kind of research do you personally do for each episode? Besides watching the movie.
Yeah, so we recast it. And so that's, for me, the only research I do is I kind of look at IMDb and see who was also considered for it. Because I will bring that up as well. So if there was a movie that, that we'll talk about Apollo 13. So Tom Hanks ended up being Jim Lovell, but they wanted Kevin Costner. So that's the kind of research. It's very simple. I usually do it about 20 minutes beforehand. Just go on and Google. That's the only research I do. Besides that and the double feature, like what movie would be good. But it's really just, we're doing movies we like. So that's a huge advantage versus having to watch a crappy movie and find a way to talk about something you don't like.
Yeah. I can attest to that for sure, because one of my shows, Spoop Squad, we watch horror movies that have flopped or have a cult following or whatever it may be. They're all streaming, so most of them are not well known, and sometimes it is very hard to find certain things that you like about something and can actually talk about. So it can get tough at times for sure. So talking about something you actually enjoy is a lot better.
And
that helps.
Between the two of us, Alan is a real film person. I mean, he's steeped in film knowledge. So I like this weekend, Always Famous is our movie. And I hadn't seen that before. It's just one of those movies that just kind of slips. The movie slips the cracks. You can't see them all. So even that, I knew I would enjoy it because we picked out the movies that we think the other one would like. We don't try to find something that, oh, this is my favorite. Oh, that's awful. We've had those. I mean, it does happen from time to time, but most of the time we both really like the movies because we agree to do the movies. And and they're all really good. And again, just like Ming was saying, they're always making good movies. They're always making bad movies too. But if you can find 5 movies a year that are really good, and you go back in time, you've got 100, 200, 300, 400 movies. You're never the 80s alone. You got so many movies that may not even be that good, but we both really love. So like Beastmaster, that's a bad movie, but it's a fun movie. We grew up on it, so we can talk about Beastmaster because we like it. Versus, let's talk about one of those Sandal movies that were just awful that they kind of copied off of that we forced to watch. It's always, like I said, it's always, that's why podcasting, it's important that whatever topic you pick, you really enjoy doing. Don't just do whatever popular or whatever's fun in the moment. It's got to be something that you like to do week after week after week.
And kind of adding on to that, don't necessarily look at other podcasts and say, well, this is already being done, but put your own spin to it.
Yeah, nobody's doing it your way.
No.
Nobody
has your voice.
Yeah, nobody is Jared. And I guarantee you nobody's lining up to be Jared. You're a wonderful guy, Jared.
No, they're not. Trust me.
But they're so busy to be themselves, and we're such in a culture of it's me that people want to put their own thing to it. So yeah, don't ever get discouraged just because someone else has the same concept.
Right.
Just don't steal people's titles.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
Try to get your own unique title.
Yeah.
WTF with Craig Price doesn't fly. That's not gonna work.
So I kind of want to touch back on something that we talked about earlier, and that's just asking people to be on your show. We kind of talked about it with the celebrities, and they can have bigger names on their show, and they can interview these people and just have conversations with them. I mean, you can too. You might not get exactly who you want all the time. You are going to run into some issues, but with this show specifically, I mean, we wanted Ming on the show, and we reached out. We talked to Ming. We were like, hey, do this thing with us, and Ming was gracious enough to be on the show. I've had a conversation with a costume designer who is a Oscar-nominated costume designer just by reaching out to her and asking her if she would do a thing with us, and she was all about it. So,
but asking Ming to be on a podcast is like giving heroin to a junkie.
Yeah,
that is true.
Pretty much, but still, there was a pause. Like, all right, I'll do it. There wasn't. I didn't even hesitate. Come on.
He didn't. He was all in at the question.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But ask people, because I think that's the problem, is they think that you have to be this big name to ask people, and it's like, you're not going to get the big names, but you can still get people you like and that are relevant to what you're talking about. Just ask after a while. It's just a matter of don't depend on them to run your show.
Right.
They're going to be great extras if you can get them, and that's exactly how you should treat it. This is a big bonus. Look, we got this exciting person on. Like, I don't do that many panels in a year, especially the last couple of years. But when we have, I'm still sitting on my Chris Eccleston one that I did because I haven't found a movie that he's in that's worth it. Because Dark World from Thor, I don't want to make him feel bad by attaching him again to that thing. But we're going to say this is a big, awesome episode because this is versus. Well, we got to have someone on every week. It's like, just ask. Don't be afraid to ask. I know some people actually go on IMDb and pay the $20 a month or whatever just to get contact information.
Yep.
Yeah, the pro version.
Yep.
Yeah, because I know that a lot of anime folks would be happy to. They're just regular people who just happen to talk on a microphone and do voiceovers. Yep. But they really like to talk to people. And some of the smaller level actors who are not, Ming Na Wen, she's a Disney princess. It's going to be hard to get her on the show, though she just doesn't know it. So because I recorded that panel in Dallas, and so we had Ming Na Wen on the show.
Yeah,
but it's one of those things where you have to ask, and it's not that big a deal. Alan, my co-host, gets kind of nervous doing it because he's just afraid that it's inconvenient, and it's like, is it inconvenience to send an email to someone that they'll ignore?
Yeah.
Or not.
And that's the big thing.
But I mean, that's the main. It's just an email. You're not paying them. You're not. Now our situation's even more difficult because they have to do homework, so they're less likely to come on our show because they have to watch a movie and recast a movie. But if you just have a regular chat show, why not? I mean, there's no harm in asking folks.
Yeah, most definitely. It's worked out well for me in the past, so I highly suggest it as well.
And I know that, especially at a Comic-Con, like I know Salt Lake actually had press, and they had them all lined up, and they let the podcasters go through and talk to them for a little bit. Even if you're at a show, if you can just, I know Sam Jones, Flash Gordon, if you'll talk to him at his booth, he'll do it. He won't, go somewhere else because he's got too busy doing he's running the booth and meeting his fans. But he'll happily talk to you at his booth at a convention if he's not super busy.
I mean, that's a big thing too, is accommodation. Whenever you have these bigger names on, you need to be accommodating and, get them in the right headspace first off, and then also just make it as easy as possible for them.
Yeah. They're guests.
Yeah.
Treat them like guests. Don't treat them like they're supposed to be there. I think that also gets a little bit. Sometimes podcast people can get a little into their own heads. It's like, hey, yeah, you're on a podcast. It's great. I'm glad you do, but it's not the NBC Nightly News. Just relax, treat people nicely, and if sometimes they'll flake on you, and you know what? It happens. No big deal. That doesn't mean you never talk to them again. It's just life happens, and podcasts for a lot of people are not priorities. So you have to make sure that you're accommodating. That's why we try to schedule things well in advance and on other people's schedules, so that way they're more likely to show up and more likely to come on.
One thing that I can kind of talk about is have the right timing too whenever you're asking them. If you know that they're going on either they're going on a publicity tour and talking about stuff, you might think, oh, that'd be a great time to ask them. Typically not, just because that's going to be very busy for them, and they're not going to really have the time to sit there and do a 30-minute to an hour podcast with somebody who's, might get them some listens, but not necessarily as much as going on to one of the bigger shows and talking about whatever they're promoting.
Plus on a tour, you're the 50th person they've talked to, and so they're just they're doing it because they're obligated to. It's part of their promotion. But to do a podcast at the middle or the end of a junket is God, it's just tiring. It's exhausting. I mean, man, you know how much energy you put up just doing a panel. Yeah. So imagine doing 50 panels in one day.
Yeah.
And you got to be charming, and you got to make sure you remember all the things you're not supposed to say, especially if you're a Marvel person. You can't say things. So it's a lot of energy that I don't think a lot of people realize.
If you're not those things, that's where they pull the bad press from too.
Yeah.
Like, he was tired during this interview. He said something bad, Right. Always pull from that crap.
Oh, sure, because that's clickbait. But yeah, even the best of them have a bad day or a bad part of a day. But yeah, definitely make sure that I try to make sure that I don't ask them when they're doing any press, because their downtime they've got a lot of extra downtime. Do it when they're not busy.
Right. That's the key, is finding the time whenever they're not going to be busy. One thing that I want to kind of finish off with in this thought process is, don't ask the same questions. If you're lucky enough to get an interview with a bigger name, don't ask the typical questions like, oh, how did you enjoy making this movie? They're going to give you a canned answer because they're so used to it. It's kind of muscle memory. Like, reach out, try to find those interesting questions that nobody's asking them. Yeah. It'll first off, it'll put them in a better headspace. Yeah. And then second off, it'll be so much better for your podcast.
And before you ask your questions that you went on Wikipedia to look for, verify that's a real thing.
Yeah. Do research for sure.
Yeah, do a little more research than just Wikipedia.
Right.
Especially if you're going to be doing an in-depth interview. I mean, if you're like me and I'm going to be doing 2 questions up front, yeah, I'll look at their Wikipedia real quick just to give me an idea of what they're doing, and then I can come up with questions outside of that. But don't go, oh, I see here, I heard that you did, Tavern on the Green in 1989. How was that? It's like, oh, someone read my Wikipedia page because that's the first thing up there, and I did it for 3 seconds. It's nothing.
And don't Chris Farley fanboy out too. Be professional.
I usually tell the audience that stuff before they come out or when they first come out. Like, especially if a kid gets really nervous, I will tell them right away, I'm nervous too. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Because I had to do that with Misha Collins and Tim Amundsen, because everybody loves Misha, and Misha doesn't need a moderator either, but he kind of was forced to. They forced me on him. And so it was one of those things where the this girl started asking a question and she's starting to freak out, and I'm like, I know, I'm freaking out too. Isn't this awesome? And it kind of makes them feel better because it's not just them, and it also gives them a second to where the focus was back on me. Again, that's what you do as a moderator. You take all the heat. You're taking all the pressure off everybody else.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't be afraid to tell people how you feel. Just don't fanboy it. You tell them how much you appreciate them. I save it to the very end. I'll do an interview, and then at the very end, as a closer, I'll just tell them how much I really appreciate and how much they've meant to me in my life, if they're that kind of person. I've rarely had those kind of situations. Who
have you fanboyed out on?
Oh, John Cleese.
Yeah.
Of course.
But I waited to the very end to do that. And again, I don't. A lot of the people that I fanboy over I go with the most talented people. It's really weird because when they ask me which ones I want to do, it's usually not the Tom Hollands or the Hiddlestons, but I will definitely want to talk to Chris Eccleston. I was super excited to talk to Brett Cullen, but Ming got that one.
It did.
Because Brett and Robert are very talented guys, and you did a great job. But I was like, I would love to get that one. Because they're super talented people.
Yeah, they got some roots in Houston too, which is cool.
Yep.
Is there anyone out there that's at the concert that you want to moderate a panel for that you haven't?
I'll be honest with you. The people at Ace, they get all the Marvel people.
They do.
Yep. I would love to be with Ace Universe kind of situation. I just like Harrison Ford if he ever did one. I have his autograph, but I talked to him for 5 minutes one day. But I would love to be able to sit down because I think and this may be ego talking, but I think I know how to handle him. I think I might be able to know how to handle him.
Okay, as I've seen most interviews, he looks like he doesn't want to be there. So
right, and so if we talk about the right things, I think I could maneuver it quite a bit. But I don't get to moderate as much as I'd like to, and so I'm just very grateful every time I get one. So anytime I get anybody, big or small, even if I don't even know any of them, and that happens a lot. Like I did My Hero Academia folks at LA Comic-Con. I don't know the show, but I was happy to be there, and I tried to make it as fun as possible and had a great time with them. It's just very thankful to be even do anything. So I will take any person you want me to talk to.
All right, conventions. Listen up. Book this man. He's amazing.
Right.
Yeah, you can go to moderator Craig Price, and if you go to there, you can see a lot of the videos and audio of things I've done in the past. Because whenever I have it, big or small, if there's video of it, even if it's not mine, a lot of it's fan-held video.
Yeah.
I'll throw it up there because I'd like to show that it happened. Just like at the LA Comic-Con, I was really excited because the guy was talking about one of the guys was talking about how he wants to run an anime-focused ice cream truck. Because we were talking about voice acting in the time of Corona and how hard it is to do it from home because Amazon trucks are backing up and neighbors are remodeling in his drill. And he was talking about the ice cream trucks going through, and he wanted to rename ice cream. And I'm like, so would it be like My Hero Macadamia? Is that what? And it boom. It was like, oh yes. So I just like to have evidence that I made a good joke. Like in John Cleese, we did our bit. Our bit is on video, and you can see him and I talking and me making him laugh and us doing stupid things. It was great. So
it will live on in infamy.
It will live on in infamy as long as those people don't get to mention the word COV and get their YouTube thing pulled down.
Right.
So we're coming up on the hour. Craig, what's one thing, if you were to mention this has to happen for you as an independent podcaster to start a show, like if you're giving some advice to somebody who wants to start a podcast, what is it? What is the one thing?
This is going to irritate you guys, but you have to start. Too many people plan, and I'm going to do a podcast. I see so many people going, I'm going to start a podcast in March. Why? I got to buy all this equipment. No, you don't. You can improve the quality of your podcast as you move along, but if you wait, you won't be that good by the time your audio will be. So might as well start as soon as possible. That's what I tell people is just start.
Why wait?
Don't
wait.
You can't. It's never going to be perfect. You're still going to have episodes that you're going to get mad at. You're not going to like the sound of your own voice. Get over it.
We all go
I don't
through
know
that.
about that. I don't know about that one.
Hey, I've edited 1,000 episodes of something that I've been in, and I hate listening to my voice even now, but I have to because to get it out and just suck it up, and because I enjoy everything else that I will tolerate the couple hours I got to do for editing. It's like my dog Gertrude. She's 16 years old. She's a pug. She's got diabetes and she's blind and she's got dementia, and she's still happy. So why am I going to punish her for the last year of her life? Because she gave me 14, 15 years of great times. Now it's my turn to not throw her out because she's getting old. Just make sure she's happy and she's comfortable. And like, well, why don't you just put her down? No, she's not in pain. She's sweet. She did 15 years of work, and now it's my turn to pay her back. It's the same thing with the podcast. You do all that work, and then when things start going well, you'll already be there, and you'll be able to reap the rewards of it. And Gertrude has reaped the rewards because she lives like a queen.
One thing that I want to talk about real quick, you mentioned that, listening to your voice while editing you're not going to like your voice. And that's because something that I did a little bit of research on it, like why do so many people not like their voice? It's because you're hearing your voice in your head in a different way than you're hearing it through your ears. So whenever you're going through and you're listening to it not in your head, it sounds different. Yeah. So that's the reason why you don't like it, because you have this image of what your voice sounds like when you're talking to yourself, as opposed to
in my mind I sound like Will Arnett.
Yeah.
But then I listen to it and I sound like Richard Kind. So it's like, that is a big difference. So yeah, but it's just everybody doesn't like it.
But they both do commercials, so that's okay.
Well, they're both great guys. But yeah, it's just a difference. Like, no one, you rarely like how you look. You rarely like how you sound. So a lot of people second guess how they act. It's just the way it is, especially if you're going to put stuff out into the world. Just toughen up a little bit. It's not that big a deal. It's just a podcast.
The more you do it, the more comfortable you'll become.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yep.
I do want to say this, Bex. We have seen your comments. We talking about the preparation of questions is very important. Doing research is helpful. Yeah, it most definitely is. We had a couple comments, but I never really found the right place to put them. So
yeah, especially it depends on how deep you're going into a conversation.
Right.
Absolutely, if you're going to go deep in a conversation, you're definitely going to have to do all your research. And it's also personal preference. Some people like to be super prepared, and it's always better to be more prepared than less prepared. But having done this enough times, I know that I need to make sure I don't get over prepared, because then I lose the magic of spontaneity. Especially if I've heard them tell a story that's really cool, and I'm like, I hope I can recreate that. No, because then it's going to sound trite. So just try to do your own thing. But yeah, research is always good, especially if it's for your comfort level.
Yeah. All right. Well, any final thoughts?
Oh, this is just like my podcast. No, you know what? My final thought is I just want to again thank you guys, because each one of you has helped me in my podcasting way. Jared, we've just met and you bailed me out at the Comic-Con and Comicpalooza. I really appreciate it. Ming, I've known for years, and every time I see him, he's awesome and always wants to help. And even if he can't, he wants to, and I appreciate that. And of course, Carrie, I've known you for years, and you've always had my back in all the situations. And so I just want everyone to know what an awesome guy you are, and that's what I appreciate, because that's what podcasting has done for me, is connected me with folks that are just cool and awesome and worth knowing.
Exactly right. Yeah. And listen and watch Cast-off, because that show was so much fun.
Yeah.
Cast-off March 1st, but always Matinee Heroes.
Yep.
Be on it too. You can't anybody be on the show.
Yes, if you go to matineeheroes.com/cast-off/application, or just go to Cast-off, you can apply. Also, on the Matinee Heroes feed, we play the episode. So we have a video. It's video, and then the audio comes out the Thursday as a bonus on our regular feed. Because you have to have a video show with it, because if someone says an obscure actor, you want to know what that person looks like right away. I can say Sal Mineo, and people are going to be like, who? And boom. And he came up. He was a tie. 2 people picked Sal Mineo at LA Comic-Con for the thing. And I knew that 90% of the people in the audience had no idea who he was, because he passed away in the 60s. So it's just a matter of just putting the visual up. But the audio shows up on Matinee Heroes, matineeheroes.com, on Twitter, on the internets, on everything, matineeheroes.com.
Branding important.
Yes. Oh, and don't forget the manatees. I don't have the pictures available. We have a lot of these great manatee shirts that are available. So, with manatees as different things, as Indiana Jones, as Wonder Woman, as the Joker and Batman, and all these things. It's part of our branding as well.
Where can they find those?
Matineeheroes.com/store. See, I love it. And you can subscribe at matineeheroes.com/
Subscribe.
See, Carrie,
my
we
God.
make
There
it
you go.
easy.
Wow.
So easy, even Carrie can figure it out.
True.
Okay, so speaking of branding, let's go ahead and put up our branding. You can find us on social media at HipsHTX, and you can email us hipshtx@gmail.com. Craig, thank you so much for taking the time, coming and joining us on the show. We really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Like I said, I appreciate each and every one of you guys. You were awesome.
And we
All right.
appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, man. We'll see you soon for sure.
Yeah,
and
hopefully Kansas City. If not, I will definitely see you in
cool.
Ontario in May.
Okay, fantastic.
awesome. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us, and that's going to do it for this episode. We will be back next month in February, and we'll definitely put all that information on social media. So definitely, once again, go follow us at HipsHTX on all social media platforms. All right, have a good night.
Bye, everyone.